Okay everybody, today we're going to be talking about seed saving. As the days are growing shorter and the nights longer, it is obviously time to wrap up our gardens and to start thinking about fall preparations. Among those things is of course seed saving, the practice of keeping seeds from the plants that you are growing in your garden this year so that you're able to plant next year or even farther into the future. Now, there are a couple of basic principles of seed saving, but depending on the plant, you really want to do your research. It depends a lot on what you're planning on harvesting, whether they're wild plants or whether they're fruits like tomatoes or squashes, or grains like corn, or legumes like beans and peas. So I find if you're going to be getting into seed saving, it's really helpful to have a resource that you can count on. I really like this book, Seed to Seed by Suzanne Ashworth, because it provides details of the exact preparations you need to go through to save various types of seeds based on their families and their specific characteristics. There are several advantages to seed saving. Of course, that means that you ultimately won't have to buy those seeds in the next year, which is always, of course, economically liberating. But also, seed saving is a tribute to indigenous ancestors of the past that, over time, saved and bred and cultivated and had an intimate understanding with our plant foods so that they could save those seeds and continue them to the next generation and ultimately to us. There's also an incredible strength and resilience that comes with saving the strongest plants' seeds from your garden. Ultimately, by saving that genetic material from those seeds that do really well in our climate, you create an ability to continue future generations of strong plants. This makes it possible to have hardy crops that are capable of surviving in our winds and our cold. And also, you want to make sure that you're saving the seeds from the most delicious plants. You want to be keeping the best of the best plants just for saving seed so that you are able to continue those plants and continue growing those characteristics that you want out of your garden. There is also an ability to find liberation away from commercial seed companies and to find that strength and sovereignty within our own communities. Also, there's something really beautiful every spring about going to seed parties where you and your friends can each bring seeds that you have saved, and you can exchange those seeds at parties to increase the diversity of your gardens, but also to be able to share in that experience of positively cultivating plants from your landscape that are capable of surviving generations on this land as well. With almost every plant, you really want to make sure that the seeds that you're saving are dry and mature. So for most things, you actually want to let them dry on the plant. In the case of these peas, they were actually left to dry right on the vine, and now that they're nice and crunchy, we can break open these pea pods and open up to get our dry peas. Now, these of course can be saved and cooked, or you can save them to plant in the next season. I have quite a few peas saved, so it will take me a while to go through all of them, but I will open up all of these pods and put them somewhere safe. Which brings me to my next point, finding places to store your seeds. Now, there's a lot of different options for storing your seeds, but you want to make sure that your seeds are going to be kept cool and dry. So you want them in a nice solid container. I like saving old glass jars. This is from some smoked salt. It's been rinsed off and it's been dried, and so it'll make a great jar to save seeds in, just like I did with these spaghetti squash seeds and just used an old spice jar. These make really great ways of saving seeds and probably something that you would have thrown away otherwise. The other thing is that you want to make sure to keep your seeds in a cool place. If you have space in a basement or somewhere that is relatively dry and doesn't get a lot of activity, not a lot of light in there, like a nice closet in a shoebox in a closet, whatever works. As long as you're keeping them away from sunlight and away from moisture and away from super hot temperatures or big temperature fluctuations, it'll give your seeds the greatest viability, meaning the greatest percentage will germinate in the next year. You also really want to make sure that whatever you're saving your seeds in, you label so that you have the name of the seed, the name of the variety that you're going to be planting in the next year. Now, if you're planning on saving squash seeds, you need to be careful because if you're planting pumpkins with zucchini, for example, there's a high probability that they will cross-pollinate and you will end up with a whole bunch of hybrid pumpkin zucchinis in the next year. So you really need to be careful about that if you're going to be planning on saving seeds. That's something that ultimately you think about in the spring and how far away your plants need to be so they won't be cross-pollinating and germinating. So they won't be cross-pollinating and creating strange hybrids unless that's what you're going for. Lots of other plants are easy to save seeds from. Obviously, sunflowers are super easy to save seeds from. Again, this is something that you want to let dry on the stalk, and then you're going to end up with a whole bunch of sunflower seeds on your sunflower. This is a big sunflower head from a Hopi Black Dye sunflower, and there's a couple ways to do this. Ultimately, you could go through and you could pick each individual little seed out of here, like this, and then put them in a cool, dry place. Or you can take this and put this over a big bowl, take a wooden spoon, and just smack the crap out of the sunflower, and that will help get a lot of these seeds off. Then you can, of course, pick out any last little stragglers that didn't make it out when you did that. Certain things are going to have really, really tiny seeds. Onions and carrots come to mind. Onions and carrots are both biennials, which means they won't create seed until their second year. So if you planted carrots in your garden this year, you won't get carrot flowers and seeds until the next year. That said, you can definitely save seeds from carrots and onions. These are a couple of chive flowers that I've let dry on the plant, and then they will have these little teeny tiny seeds that you can get out like this. You could even hit them on a white sheet of paper so that you can see them very easily. And they'll just be these little black seeds that you can save, and then you can start your onions inside early in the next year. So I will show you guys what these little black seeds look like.
3, 2.
A lot of you guys are growing tomatoes, and I'm sure you're going to want to save seeds from tomatoes, in part because they're so easy to grow and you probably have a ton of tomatoes. Tomatoes are a super cool seed to save, in part because tomatoes very rarely cross-pollinate, meaning you can have a ton of different varieties of tomatoes in your garden, and they mostly self-pollinate, meaning the flowers from the male parts will shake down onto the female parts of the flower, and they won't have a lot of cross-pollination between different varieties. So if you are growing Cherokee purple tomatoes, you can save the seeds from those Cherokee purple tomatoes, and they will be Cherokee purple tomatoes in the future. Unlike squashes, which often cross-pollinate, this makes them super easy to plant a whole bunch of different varieties. That said, you need to know how to treat tomato seeds in order to save them. There's actually a gel on the outside of the tomato seeds that coats them inside, which actually prevents them from germinating inside the wet environment inside the tomato. So in order to save the seeds so that they're viable and they'll germinate when you put them in the soil, you have to ferment the gel and the seeds outside of the tomato. This gets a little bit gross, but isn't super complicated. So what you're going to want to do with a nice ripe tomato is to cut the tomato like this. So you're not cutting down the stem, you're cutting around the fat side. So you're gonna cut around the tomato. So that you access all those little pockets where the seeds are kept. And then you get a nice plastic or glass jar, and you're gonna squeeze the gel with the seeds into your jar. You're not trying to squeeze the actual tomato fruit, but you're trying to get most of those seeds out. And again, they're going to be surrounded in that weird gel. As I said, a little gross, but that'll help you get your seeds out. Obviously, in nature, what happens is the tomato fruit will fall off the plant, and then it will rot on the ground, which is what the fermentation process does, and then it will sprout as soon as that soil gets warm enough and you have your spring rains come. For the purposes of seed saving, we kind of have to replicate that rotting process in our environment. This is going to get even grosser. So if you're going through this process, keep this jar away from places in your home where animals or kids could knock this over. And what I would do is leave this in a safe place outside where hopefully birds can't get to it too. So what we have is a whole bunch of tomato seeds and the gel that surrounds them. I'm going to add a little bit of water, about a half a cup of water to this, and then I'm going to let this sit in a warm place until mold covers the entire surface of this container. At that point, I'm going to put this in a strainer and I'm going to wash all of this out so that we're washing the mold off, we're washing the gel out, and we're left with just the seeds. Then with the seeds, we're going to put it on a cookie sheet with some parchment paper and let them dry out until those seeds break when they're bent. We want them to be nice and dry so that we can store them in a seed saving container. Happy harvesting! I hope this video helped you, and I hope that you have a wonderful time exploring seed saving and learning more about the process for creating strong, healthy plants within your garden.